Welcome everyone to the PJ's Cast. I'm your host Pierce, alongside of my good pal Dylan. This is the first episode we have done since early July. Not that there's really been anything to talk about in the hockey world, but our first podcast in almost 2 months. I think it's only appropriate for us to bring back onto the show Ben Pope for the second time this year. How's it going, Ben?
I'm good. Yeah, it's always fun to hop on here. Thanks for having me.
I believe we did one back in April, like a week after the season ended, and I remember you said that you were going to Japan. So, how was that, and how was the rest of your summer, and what did you do with the rest of your summer?
Yeah, Japan was amazing. I feel like in addition to everything I saw being so interesting and beautiful and everything, there's just that extra like kind of foreignness factor with it just being so different than North America that adds to it. So yeah, it was pretty amazing trip. It's been like 3 months now, but yeah, we were in Tokyo and then Kyoto, and um, it was pretty amazing. I think my girlfriend would have wanted to just stay permanently, so it was tough getting on the flight back home. But it's funny, like everybody I talked to about it since then is like, oh, we're going to Japan too. Like Wyatt Kaiser went this summer, and Dana Gray, who's the Rockford broadcaster, went, and I was talking to both of them about it. So it's kind of a few people in the Blackhawks world who have been to Japan this summer. Other than that, I moved apartments, so background is a little bit different now. You can check out the Brita filter that I don't use and stuff, but otherwise, pretty uneventful besides those two things.
I have to ask because this is technically our seventh season covering the Blackhawks on this podcast, if you count the 2020 bubble, because we started, I think, a month right after COVID hit and everything stopped. I'm wondering, like, what season is this for you now? Or because I feel like you came around or like joined the Blackhawks beat around the same time.
I think this is my seventh year. Also, I started the year before COVID, so maybe my math is wrong. But I came in 2019, so it's been like my 6 years at Sun Times was in May. So, but I think this is year 7 of the Blackhawks beat. Um, so yeah, it's wild that it's been that many at this point. Like I think Mark Lazarus, who was before me at the Sun Times, was there 5 years or 6 years. So it's wild that I have outlasted him at the outlet. Obviously, he's still been on the beat longer than me, but crazy to think about. I feel like the fact that he was covering a lot of playoff runs and a lot of big moments, and for me, not as much, makes it seem like he had more going on during his, which certainly was true, but it made it feel longer. Watching him from afar than it's felt for me in this job.
Yeah, I think both him and Scott Powers were on the beat in 2013, so they were just like thrown right in the middle of their cup runs. And I think Charlie Roumeliotis, when we had him on, he said that he was there as an intern for Game 6 of the 2015 Cup Finals. So yeah, it's been very contrasting to when they started covering the Hawks than to what you were, and we're unfortunately probably going to get more of the same this year, another bottom feeding season, but probably ultimately necessarily like this franchise probably needs another high end pick. So we'll get into the questions about the Blackhawks. Kind of timed up great that when I message you, do you want to do a podcast soon? That the Frank Nazar extension news, that he signed his contract. I wonder what your thoughts are on that, because I think all three of us here believe highly in Frank Nazar, and that seems like the consensus in the public sphere as well. I just don't see any scenario, even if he isn't worth 6.59991, his jersey number, whatever it is now. I just feel by the end of the season, if he does what we think he can be, he's going to be worth that. And with the cap going up, it's just going to become a bargain deal. And even if he doesn't hit like what we think he can be, again, with just the cap going up, if he's even just a regular 50-point center, I still think that contract is going to age quite well.
Yeah, I agree. I think if the Blackhawks were Florida or Edmonton or a team like that, maybe you'd have a little bit more pause about this. But for them, I mean, they were already very wedded to him long term. Like if he doesn't succeed, the team is going to have a much lower chance of succeeding. And they were already, in their long term cap calculations, penciling him in for a chunk of that. So you might as well just get it on the books, get it locked in now. There's really, I mean, they have so much cap room in the short term, and in the long term, if he's not worth 6.6 million, then you have bigger problems than a wasted 6.6 million. So that's kind of how I'm looking at it. I feel like sort of a no-brainer for them to do this. And I think maybe for Nazar, it was more of a tougher decision, where he talked about how he always believes he's the best, and you have to have that kind of supreme confidence to play this game. And if you follow that logic out, by that, if he believes in himself that much, he would believe that he's going to have a huge season and that his value would be even higher next summer. So I can see why he'd be tempted to wait. And that's kind of what I assumed he would do. But it sounds like the kind of getting this basically guaranteed money and the impact that can have on him and his family, and removes a bit of a distraction. And I guess he decided in the long run to just knock it out now and just focus on hockey for this year. And certainly like 47 million or whatever the total sum is that's a lot of money. So I don't think he's going to be struggling financially, even if he could have gotten a couple million more if he waited till next summer. So I think it does make sense for both sides.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think he'll be fine. Sorry,
yeah, go ahead. No, you're good.
Oh, I was just gonna say, maybe he could have waited till next summer. And I have no doubt that if he has a season where he lives up to his potential, like I think most people think he can, he probably would have been able to cash in for more money. But also, as a 21-year-old, $46 million is $46 million. So I think that's just a contract. Yeah, it's a risk, but I don't really see a scenario where it can go so wrong that it's just not worth it. I think it's going to be worth it, whether he's really good or just good.
My whole thing is I'm just curious how this contract affects other players in similar situations, because, outside of, I think Kaprizov's the closest equivalent, this is like the least amount of games a player's played to get a contract at this amount of money. And if it does pay dividends for the Blackhawks, it might change the way teams look at, going about that long-term contract. Obviously, that's kind of been the trend the last 5 or 6 years or so. You want to lock them up really long-term and, make sure you get a couple of those UFA years down the line. But at such a short clip of term, and, obviously the Blackhawks are very high on what he can do. And, I think this podcast has been very high on what he can do since his U.S. development days. But
even before he was drafted, yeah.
But I'm just curious to see if this does work for the Hawks. I think it might have an effect on the league. Like, you look at a guy like, I know that it's a little different, but Cutter Gauthier has only played less than 100 games, and he's coming up on an extension. So you have to wonder, does he go the bridge route or does he go the long-term route? It's something that's going to be very interesting down the road for sure.
We did see Jackson Blake get a long-term extension, pretty comparable after a pretty comparable amount of experience earlier this summer in Carolina. He played a few more games, but he's coming off his rookie year, basically the same as Nazar, and he got a little bit less than Nazar, but an extra year, so not a huge difference in money. And this is something the Hurricanes have always done, or at least in the recent time period, been making long-term commitments to young guys. And sometimes you get Kotkaniemi and it doesn't totally work out, and then sometimes it does. So the Blackhawks have tried to emulate the Hurricanes in several ways, and we know Tulsky and Davidson trade frequently and have a good relationship. So it's a little bit in that mold, in my opinion.
100%. And, that takes us to the next young players kind of up next for contracts. And you look at a player like Connor Bedard. I think it's already come out that there's mutual agreement. They kind of want to play the season out, see how it goes. If in Bedard's case, he could very well be over point a game, and that changes those negotiations for the Blackhawks. You'd like to get him on that long-term deal now, but it probably benefits both sides anyway. I'm just curious in terms of, him and Spencer Knight, which deal do you think gets done first out of those two? Because I know the Blackhawks want to commit to him as their number one goalie going forward as well. So just wondering if you're hearing anything on either of those ends.
No, I haven't heard anything on either front. Bedard has obviously been very vocal about that it is going to get done. He is planning to sign long-term, and I think that's been smart of him. To not let any social media speculation start to gain steam about that. And Knight, I haven't heard anything either. I think if one of them gets done in season, it'll probably more likely be Knight, just because it might be a little bit easier to figure out a monetary value. with him coming off his second deal. He's already at $4.5 million. You have a little bit more track record. Bedard is going to be, asking for a huge number, and that might be difficult to negotiate in season just because of how high stakes it's going to be. And also, he seems like a guy who would be very important to him to just focus on hockey. Honestly, Knight too, for that matter. Both of them are pretty focused guys. So I think more likely than not, we wait till next summer for both of them. But if I had to pick one to happen in season, I'd probably say Knight. He also is going to have arbitration rights, so he has a little bit more leverage. So I don't know if that's going to make it more likely to happen sooner or more likely to happen later, but that is another difference between their situations.
Yeah, because in Knight's case, you got to think if he has a solid season, he could be looking at like a, Jeremy Swayman-esque contract. Not saying it's that number, but that term in that case. And I know arbitration was a big selling point for Swayman when he was going through his negotiations. So I didn't even think of that aspect. But it does come to that point where, yeah, they are very focused individuals, and it doesn't seem like it's something that would get done mid-season. And let's be honest, they'll have the cap space regardless. I think they have like 50 mil or something next off season, so they'll be good in that regard for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and it's not as if they're UFAs. Like, again, Spencer Knight is an RFA with arbitration rights, and Bedard is just an RFA without like they're going to be able to get them signed long term. My next question is the podcast we did in April is we talked about they didn't have a coach. Well, they haven't committed to a head coach. They were looking for head coaches. Ultimately, David Carl didn't work out, and he ultimately went back to Denver University. Mike Sullivan, I don't think was ever been an option, and I feel like they landed on probably the most boring option in Jeff Blashill, because like I didn't want them to go after someone like, say, John Tortorella, Peter Laviolette, or even Gerard Gallant, who's coaching in China now. But what do you think Jeff Blashill, like, have you talked to Jeff Blashill? And I don't necessarily want to ask like, how do you think he's going to make this team better, but like, what do you think about Jeff Blashill?
Yeah, I talked to him a few weeks ago for a story, just kind of on his plans for training camp and how he's gotten to know the players. And I can't say like I knew a ton about him before he got hired. Obviously, had seen him all those years in Detroit, but they were one of the most irrelevant teams in the league. And he doesn't have like a Tortorella type personality, but I think it has been, fairly impressive hearing about just the thoroughness which he goes about things. Like, it seems like he's really put a lot of work in to get to know his players. He's rewatched a ton of games from last season. He's talked to them. He's talked to some of their coaches and agents and family and friends. Like, he's really put in work to get to know them. And not only in terms of a communication and coaching standpoint, in terms of what guys need, what kind of style of coaching, like who can take a little bit more harshness and constructive criticism, and who needs to be propped up a little bit more, who wants, long sit down conversations, and who wants just straight to the point, like learning that sort of thing. And then also learning their skills on the ice, and how they're best deployed, and what they succeeded with, what they struggled with last season. So it's interesting how much work he's put in on that front. I'm sure every NHL coach does that to some extent when he gets hired, but I don't recall hearing about it as much with previous guys who have been through Chicago. And then secondly, just his plans for training camp. I mean, he loves the term winning habits. We're going to hear that every day. I can already tell you this. Even when I talked to Spencer Knight about Blashill, he brought up the term winning habits. So it just spreads. Everyone's going to say winning habits. And certainly, I mean, that's a cliche that we've probably heard from Luke Richardson and Anders Sorensen at some point too. But it does seem like there's going to be an emphasis on back checking and, stopping on pucks and being a little bit more defensively responsible in training camp for guys like Bedard, who haven't maybe been the most successful defensively. And I know one concern that a lot of fans had is that in Detroit, he didn't, give his defensemen a lot of freedom. It was kind of get the puck and pass it as soon as you can. They weren't that involved in the breakout. And it sounds like he realizes that the Blackhawks, prospects defense, the young guys coming up do excel with that, and that he's willing to adjust his systems to accommodate that and give them more freedom to carry the puck and then jump in on the rush after they move it and that sort of thing. So that was reassuring to hear as well that he is willing to kind of be adaptive and think outside the box based on what he's working with.
Yeah,
it's
that's
nice to
good.
have a head coach. Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Talking
No.
over. It's nice to have a head coach that at least has experience, because we've just had however many years, 7 or 8 years of Jeremy Colleton and then Luke Richardson and Andre Sorensen. And unfortunately, I think they were just doomed from the start. And while, like, obviously, I think for just about everyone as Blackhawks fans, Jeff Blashill wasn't our number one choice. It was at least good to have a coach that has had previous NHL experience. If you just look historically, usually coaches on their second or third team, that's when they really put it together. And also, like, he had some pretty awful Detroit Red Wings teams, and I would say they're pretty close to the level of what the Blackhawks are now. And he was able to average, I think, a little over 30 wins a season, and I think that's the main thing for me going into this year. Can this team crack 30 wins? That's all I'm asking for at this point. Like, that's how low the bar is in Blackhawk land right now. So yeah, I'm open-minded for Jeff Blashill, but we got to see everything play out.
Yeah, I feel like in terms of kind of expectations for this season, certainly every model is going to project them to be one of the worst teams in the league again, in the Sharks tier. But I feel like with there being so many young guys that we haven't seen that much of, like, the range of possibilities is at least a little bit wider than it's been. Like, maybe they're going to be even worse than we thought, but it's also possible they could be better than we think. And that wasn't as much the case the past few years when you kind of knew exactly what these 30-year-old placeholders were going to be. I mean, every year there's teams that kind of are expected to be bottom feeders and hang around in the playoff bubble, whether it was Philly 2 years ago or Montreal or Columbus this past year. Probably helped by the fact that the East is easier than the West right now, which is not working in the Blackhawks' favor. But I think it's possible they could be more competitive than we expect, but also possible that they're going to be in the 60 to 70 point range again.
That's a very good point. The whole, like, high ceiling and low floor thing, that they could be better than last year, but they could also be worse. That's very interesting. And I think one thing that you wrote in an article from a few months ago was that you said that the Blackhawks were the first team since the late 90s, early 2000 Tampa Bay Lightning to go, I think, 4 or 5 seasons in a row. I think it was 5 seasons in a row and not win 30 games again. That's just something that's really stuck with me. And please just win 30 games. I'm begging. That's all I'm asking right now.
That's a good point. Yeah, we'll have to have the race to 30 this year. Keep track of, see if they can do it.
It's been a 3-year race, Ben. We're not winning it. But with that, I know you were talking about, winning habits in training camp and whatnot. And I think this is going to be one of the more, like, in my opinion, the most exciting training camp since 2021, 2022 in terms of, who's going to take those roster spots on the team. Obviously, at that point, it was like Adam Gaudette and stuff. But now it's the kids coming up and, potentially stealing some of these roster spots. And, just a couple names come to mind, like, Ethan Del Mastro, Artem Levshunov, Nick Lardis, Colton Dock, players of that extent that, have had time in the AHL, Nolan Allen. I'm just curious, who are your dark horses going in the training camp, do you think, for that could potentially make this team out of camp?
Well, I would say Lardis is certainly maybe the most interesting one. I think the odds are that he'll start in Rockford, but I'm fascinated to see what he'll look like. I mean, he's coming off one of the best OHL seasons in recent history, but he hasn't really ever faced pros. He's not the biggest guy, and his game, it's possible maybe doesn't translate as well to the pros, but also I know that's something that he's worked on specifically the past 2 years of, like, keeping in mind what it's going to be like going against pros and trying to do things in juniors that would translate. And you can't write off those numbers. So I'm really, really, really interested to see how he looks. And I expect he'll be in the rookie camp in the Curvers tournament before the season. I think that'll be really interesting to see how he fares in that tournament, because that's been kind of a jumping off point for guys in the past, even going back to like Brandon Hagel in 2019, where if you really impress in that tournament, it can build a lot of momentum into main camp. And then maybe somebody else who obviously is a little bit more known, but I think Ethan Del Mastro finished last year really well and kind of jumped ahead of Nolan Allen in the depth chart. And I'm curious to see how he looks. I kind of have him penciled in as an NHL roster guy for sure, probably a second pairing guy, but I know other people are not as sure. I don't think he's very well known outside of the Hawks market, especially. So he's another guy I'm interested to see. But really, I mean, there's so many young guys. It is going to be a fascinating camp to get a glimpse of all of these guys and how they kind of can translate up a level. And I'm even kind of excited for the preseason games because I know we typically write up preseason as not mattering, and for a lot of teams it doesn't. But I mean, you look back at the last 2 or 3 years, and the Hawks have been terrible in the preseason. Like last year, they were 0-5 and kind of not even close until they won that game in Milwaukee. And it did prove sort of indicative for the team they were in the regular season. So certainly you have to take it with a grain of salt. But I think the preseason results we might need to read into a little bit more this year than we have been up to this point. I think that it can tell you something about how competitive they might be.
100%. It can tell you, what players are ready to start the season. And, I want to go back to Ethan Del Mastro for a second because I think Pierce and I are pretty high on him as well. I think the last 10 to 15 games he played down the stretch, it was just extremely well. And, he knows when to pinch offensively. He's just very sound defensively. Like, I personally think that's the kind of guy you can go pair with a Connor Murphy during this season. And, that could be a steady pairing. But, we've seen it time and time again with Blackhawks defensemen when they get that time to develop. I'm not saying he could take a jump like Alex Vlasic did, but the similarities are there in a sense. I think Vlasic's a better skater, obviously, but the opportunity is going to be there. I think the left side's wide open after Vlasic. I mean, I love Kaiser. I think he played extremely well down the stretch. Korchinski's going to be a name that's going to fight for that spot as well, but I think he, like you said, Ethan Del Mastro is probably the most defensively sound out of those three. So it's going to be very curious to see who Blashill gravitates towards out of the young crop of defensemen that the Hawks have. Because obviously you look at Rinzel and Levshunov and Vlasic, and you can tell they're going to be NHL defensemen down the line. Vlasic already is, obviously, but I think those next three spots are going to be very interesting to watch over this entire season, even after the deadline, because maybe Connor Murphy sticks around at the deadline. I would love for him to get a chance to go play some playoff hockey. I don't know what he wants at this point in his career, but if he does get moved, that's another slot that gets open as well. So it's very interesting for sure.
Yeah, the defense in general is going to be fascinating it's Murphy and a ton of guys 24 years old or younger.
Kids.
So I mentioned Del Mastro, but really all of them are pretty interesting. Like, if Korchinski's gotten stronger, if Levshunov's improved his decision making, if Kaiser, assuming a contract gets done, like where he looks, because he's been very inconsistent, but he did play his best hockey the last month or two of last season. Yeah, really all of them are going to be pretty interesting.
And they have proven chemistry with each other. It looks like, like Kaiser and Levshunov, I think, started growing some chemistry down the stretch there. And, they're probably going to already start putting Rinzel with Vlasic, if I had to guess. And, it's going to be interesting to see like where the chemistry starts to form with these young players. It looks like from the looks of it, Bedard and Nazar you could probably put anyone on their wings right now and they'll produce at a pretty good rate. But, for some of these other players, it's going to be interesting to see what players unlock the next steps in their skill set. I'm not saying it's on that level, but, last year, Lucas Reichel, I think, found a role on the fourth line with Patrick Maroon and Craig Smith. I think he found something of his game that can translate to the NHL level. Yeah, maybe he's not a 50, 60 point guy, but that he played a NHL style of hockey in the bottom six last year. And I'm just curious to see maybe what brings out the best traits in these players.
Yeah, I actually talked to Reichel today for a story that'll be coming soon about just his summer training and the things he's worked on. And he's obviously kind of had problems being a bit of a perimeter player in the offensive zone. And so we kind of talked about how he's working on trying to win pucks and then get into space in the middle. And so, yeah, I mean, another guy is kind of his back against the wall season for him. So, yeah, you can go down the list. I mean, it's The Blackhawks might not be the most interesting team in the league in general, but they might have the most interesting training camp. I mean, it's I don't know how many other teams have this many guys that you're like really actually interested to see how they look as the Hawks do.
Definitely. It also doesn't help for Reichel that you're in trade conversations every other week with some source of media. Oh, this team's interested in him. This team's interested in him. I just feel bad for the kid. Like his name's in trade discussions for the last 9 months, and I don't think, and maybe they do, but I don't think they have any intention of moving him this year. So we'll see.
I think it definitely could happen if he struggles again, because then you get to the point of, okay, well, maybe this guy just is what he is, at least without a change of scenery. But yeah, I mean, it certainly sucks for him. He said that his friends in Germany have been teasing him about it. So, I mean, it's part of the life, though.
Oh yeah, big time.
I don't want to go through all the lines, but who do you think is going to be the line mates for Bedard and the line mates for Nazar? I just have Daily Faceoff pulled up, and I'm wondering if maybe you agree with this. But right now, the first line is Burakovsky, Bedard, Donato, and then the second line is Bertuzzi and Nazar and Teravainen. Do you think we'll see that? Like, there's a good chance we'll see those as the top 6 forward lines?
That's funny. That's actually exactly what I put in my line projections story like a month or two
Maybe
ago.
that's where they got it from.
I was going to say that it's very possible that I'm doing a podcast with them tomorrow, so I think it's maybe
Bring that up in
more than possible that that's where they got it from. I mean, certainly there's a very good chance it's not going to be those combinations. There's a lot to figure out, and I think one of the big priorities for Blashill is going to be finding combinations in camp and then sticking to them, considering how much last year that was an issue. The first few months of the year with the shuffling, I feel like Teravainen and Bertuzzi kind of played a lot with Nazar down the stretch last year and worked decently well in that role, and they each kind of provide something different. We could see them try it out with Bedard again. Obviously, entering last year, we kind of thought those two guys would be with Bedard, and they just didn't really get that much opportunity to. I think the idea of having Burakovsky and Donato together, regardless of who the center is kind of interesting because they played together in Seattle. They didn't play together on the same line a lot, but they did play on the same team and played a little bit together and had pretty decent results in those minutes together. They're kind of friends. Like, I think Donato talked to him this summer when he got traded. And they're both very efficient scorers. Like, they both, get to the net and can put pucks in. Burakovsky, look at his career. He's had one of the best career shooting percentages of any active player, at least in Washington and Colorado. So if he can kind of rediscover his form, I think he's a candidate to be on the first line. If he doesn't rediscover his form, he's a candidate to be on the fourth line. Like, there's a wide range of possibilities for him. But I do think it's worth giving him and Donato a try together. But it's really, anyone's guess who those two first line wingers are going to be. I wouldn't bet any money on any particular combination.
Yeah, it'd be nice to get
it happen.
Yeah, it could be nice to get to some consistency on Bedard's wings this year. That'd be nice. Outside of Donato, I think Donato had a pretty good stint on his wing this last year, but he also had a good stint at center at that one point. So I don't know. But you're 100% right. If they're switching lines every 2 games again, or every game at that matter, they're never going to form chemistry. It's what this sport is built on at the end of the day.
Yeah, that was definitely. I mean, that was one of the biggest things that got Richardson fired. So definitely a mistake to avoid.
100%. And I had one last question on my end. Obviously we're going into the 100th season of the Blackhawks right now, and they're doing a lot of exciting things off the ice. I just want to know if there's anything in particular that you've heard that might be pretty exciting, or anything special they're doing for the 100th year anniversary. Is there any maybe potential special games going on, or what are you hearing in regards to what they're going to do for this 100th season?
Well, I mean, they announced a few weeks ago that they're kind of splitting it up into those 4 eras, kind of over each time period. And each one kind of has a capstone game where it's sort of a jersey retirement-esque ceremony. There's obviously no jerseys being retired this year, they've said, but there'll be that kind of level of pomp and circumstance. and a lot of giveaways too. Apparently, they had heard from a lot of frustrations from fans the past few years about the lack of giveaways, and kept telling them just wait till the centennial year, wait till the centennial year. So they're trying to make up for it. I think like almost half the home games have a giveaway of some sort, although you might have to be one of the first 2,000 fans to get some of them. I think there's going to be a lot of, Chicago celebrity guest appearances and just random things like that aren't planned. I was talking to Chris Chelios, and for another story that's coming up soon, he said he's doing some booking because he kind of knows everybody. So I think it should be cool for that, especially, for the ticket sales. That's one of the big things driving it this year. Like, they kind of have one more year of guaranteed good attendance and sales before the on ice product has to start improving to keep people reeled in. And it's because of the centennial year that they have that one last season. So they want to make it worth it. And it sounds like sales have been good, so they've been getting what they hoped for this.
So the on ice product matches it. I mean, or at least somewhat, but because not everyone is as diehard as Pierce or I. So at least that spends money on the tickets, that is. But it's going to be an exciting season regardless, even if, the on ice product isn't great. Like you said, I think the spectacle of it all is going to be very interesting to see. And, maybe usher in obviously it's kind of coming at a good time if they do get a little bit better. It could be ushering in a new era of Blackhawk hockey. It could also just kind of put a stamp on what this team's been 95% of the time, and or not 95, good 3/4 of its franchise. Be interesting to see.
Yeah.
Bring that up, Dylan. Like, we're the diehard fans. We're the 1% of the 1% because we are diehard hockey fans. I don't think the Blackhawks as a franchise would ever have to worry about losing us. Like, I feel like we've been through like up and down everything with this franchise in like the 15 plus years that we've been cheering for them. I'd be more worried about the casual fans with this. But anyways, my last question for you, Ben, is what do you think is like a realistic expectation for this team this season? Like, I'm just gonna keep pounding the drum. 30 wins. I think if they can take that, that's like a solid step forward, because technically they did improve from the season before. I think they went from 23 to 25 wins, but I would like to see a little bit more of an increase than that.
I feel like 30 is a reasonable goal. I saw JFresh came out with his first model projections today, and I think he had him at 75 points. So
I would say 75 points. I would love that.
Yeah, I mean that's 30 wins almost certainly, unless they lose a bajillion overtime games. So I feel like that's probably a good target in terms of realistic, but not too ambitious. But we'll have to see. As I was talking about earlier, I think the range of possibilities is very, very wide here. So
yeah,
it's hard to say. And I feel like I've been a little bit too optimistic in previous years with my projections, but probably everyone has been, just because they've been so awful. So we'll see.
Yeah, we all think they're making that 10 point. Like I said, it's going on year 3 of them getting that 30 win jump. So we'll see if they can hit it this time. Oh man.
Yeah, but I do feel like there's a bit, because I just think that front office wants another top 5 pick, and honestly, like, maybe I'm just that meme of the guy slowly putting on the clown makeup and buying into another bad year. But yeah, if they come out of it with a Gavin McKenna or an Ivor Sternberg or whatever, any of the top prospects, that might help out. And maybe they don't take the leap this year, but maybe just all this nucleus of young talent, maybe in a couple of years they'll become a good team. I don't know, but yeah, definitely compared to previous years, like, I feel we are like seeing some tangible, like, this year we're gonna have a full year of Frank Nazar and Sam Renzel, who I find it fascinating that I feel like everyone is ranking Sam Renzel ahead of Lev Shunov and Frundell, who are top 3 picks. Like, that's how good he looked coming into the NHL. So there's going to be young players on this team this year, but like what you said, there's more of a boom or bust to this team than there has in previous years. It could be better, or shit could be worse.
Yeah. I had a thought in the middle of your comments and then I lost it, but Renzel is, I mean, I ranked him number one in my prospect rankings, although admittedly I factor in readiness in addition to upside. So Renzel is, clearly ahead of Lev Schnav and Frondell in that category. So if you were going purely on upside, maybe he wouldn't be ahead of them. But it is interesting that we've kind of all so conclusively formed this opinion after 9 games that he was that good that people aren't even mentioning how small the sample size was. And I guess the fact that he was so good in college all year leading up to that, that's a bit of a larger sample. But yeah, I mean, we didn't even talk about him that much in this podcast, and he's going to be almost as fascinating as anybody else in camp too. Just another guy on that list.
Yeah, I just feel we like get anointed it. Not like I'm trying to be like, oh, he sucks and he doesn't deserve. Like he was very good. Like he clearly, like he looked like at least a 5-year veteran out there. He just looks so poised. But obviously we look at that stretch down the stretch where it was actually fun to watch the Blackhawks and they had all their young guys up and it was like 15, 20 game stretch. That's only a fifth, a quarter of the season. Now you got to go out and do that for 82 games.
Yeah, and I'm sure conditioning will be a big thing for all. I mean, even Vlasic talked about that kind of, became an issue for him late last season where he just got kind of worn down energy wise. So that's something that for all these guys who are accustomed to playing college seasons or kind of bouncing back and forth between levels to play 82 NHL games, hopefully if they stay healthy, is going to be a challenge. I know Spencer Knight, even though he's been in the NHL for years, he's never had a starter's workload, and that's been the number one focus for him this summer too, is building up his stamina to kind of prepare for 55 starts or however many ends up being. So that as the year goes on, that'll be something to monitor for sure, how they kind of hold up to the rigors of the NHL.
Okay, this is officially my last question. Who do you think, besides Connor Bedard, can be the biggest X factor for the Blackhawks this year and make them into a way better team than we think they can be?
Well, I think I literally wrote that Knight was the X factor in my story
That's
a week or two ago. So, I mean, it's a cliche that the goaltending is your most important player, but I feel like he is going to have a big influence here, not just because of his position, but because he's seen what it takes to get to the top. Like, he's a very observant guy, and he watched Bobrovsky lead the Panthers to a Stanley Cup. I'm always learning new things from him. He's a really fascinating mind, interesting personality too. And I think if he can kind of take that step into being, a strong NHL starter, that would make a huge difference on this team. They've had stretches of good goaltending throughout this rebuild, like Mrazek year before last had that, but they haven't had anyone to the caliber of Knight. So he was up and down in his stint, at the end of last season. I think he was at like 890 with the Hawks save percentage, which isn't that great. And he's at 903 for his career, which is right about NHL average right now. But you look at I looked at guys who had a 903 save percentage over their first 50 some games, however many it's been for Knight. And there's a very wide range of possibilities there in terms of where those guys have gone on to. Like you have Jacob Markstrom on one end, who's turned into a very strong NHL starter, and then you have Ilya Samsonov on the other end, who's basically washed out of the league. So I think Knight, you can be fairly confident is not going to be the worst case scenario just based on his talent and his pedigree. It's not like those guys were as hyped coming in as Knight as a former first round pick, but I think he's really the X factor, and the guy who if he can be really strong, can cover a lot of flaws in front of him.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I'm some more X factors just on the team in general. I'm looking as that second left-handed defensive spot. Who's going to take that over? Could Korchinski just have amazing camp, or is it Del Mastro, or is it the guy who hasn't even signed his contract yet with Wyatt Kaiser? And then just Nick Lardis, I feel, is just the most representative of the conversation where he's like a boomer bust, where I feel he could if he has a hot start in Rockford, we could see him before the Olympic break on Connor Bedard's line. I think he's just the most fascinating prospect in the system right now.
Yeah, for sure. Agreed with all that.
All right, that's all I got. We won't keep you for too much longer. Dylan, do you have anything else to add, or we can wrap us up?
I'm all good here. It's always a pleasure having you on, Ben.
Yep. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me. It's always a good time.